The first chill of November had just settled over Windward Bay when I realized my life had changed in ways I could never have imagined. My name is Eleanor, Ellie Carrington, and I had just returned from what was supposed to be the final chapter of my life. A chapter I never wanted written. The night before, I had sat in the dimly lit corner of a small nursing home in Porto Verde, staring out the barred window at streets that were impossibly foreign, knowing my own daughter and son-in-law had vanished, leaving me as though I had ceased to exist. They had called it a family decision, a trip abroad that was meant to be a surprise vacation, a way to care for me, they said. But the reality had been far different. They had planned to abandon me, leaving me in a place I did not know, in a country whose language I barely recognized. I had quickly learned the rhythm of deceit, the polished smiles of nurses who were instructed to keep me in my room, the forms I was told I needed to sign, the locked doors I was warned never to leave. But Ellie Carrington did not surrender. At 76, I had survived far too many storms to be quietly shuffled away into obscurity. I had found a weakness in their plan: complacency. The nursing home staff, though polite, were inexperienced in navigating someone who refused to cooperate. I listened, I observed, and I waited. One morning, when the staff shifted and the doors were briefly unattended, I left. I walked through narrow cobbled streets, using a combination of intuition, broken Portuguese, and sheer stubbornness to reach the airport. I returned home before my daughter, Marissa, and her husband, Luke, could even realize the trap they had set. The sight of my own front door, unlocked and familiar, was more intoxicating than any perfume or fine wine I had ever known. I slipped inside quietly, relishing the feeling of being back in my own world. But the tranquility was short-lived. My granddaughter, Tessa, was sitting at the kitchen table with her school books spread in a perfect arc in front of her. Her eyes were wide, a mixture of relief and fear. "Grandma, they tried to take you away, didn't they?" she whispered. I nodded, setting my bag down slowly. "Yes, Tessa, and I'm back. They thought they could erase me, but they miscalculated." Her fingers trembled slightly as she reached for mine. "What are we going to do?" I took a deep breath. "We are going to make sure no one ever gets away with treating anyone like that. Not me, not anyone else. But first, we need proof. Every receipt, every photo, every message. We need to show the truth before they can rewrite the story." Tessa's school books and pens lay abandoned as we began gathering every piece of evidence we could find. Receipts from international transactions, photos of the car rental and the ferry we had supposedly taken together, and even the emails they had attempted to delete. Each piece of paper felt like a small victory against the audacity of betrayal. The bell rang in the middle of our sorting. Through the window, I saw a young woman, clipboard in hand, wearing a badge I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Carrington?" she called, her voice professional but kind. "I'm Valerie Monroe from the Windward Herald. I'm reporting on an unusual story involving elder care and international travel. May I ask you a few questions?" Tessa's grip on my arm tightened. "The press?" she hissed. Yes, another tactic, I muttered under my breath. They want to control the story. We will control it first. I opened the door, but kept the chain locked. Miss Monroe, I have no comment at this time. There has been a family misunderstanding, and my granddaughter and I are handling it privately. The young reporter's brow furrowed. Your daughter expressed concern for your well-being and mentioned exploring legal guardianship. I felt a pang of cold anger. Guardianship? They weren't just trying to spin the story. They were attempting to declare me incapable of managing my own life. Miss Monroe, as I said, no comment. If you want the full story, my attorney can provide it. I closed the door firmly. I dialed my lawyer, Henry Caldwell, immediately. Helly, I already know, he said sharply before I could explain. Marissa filed for emergency guardianship this morning. Claims of paranoia, cognitive decline. Says you're a danger to yourself. Can she do that? I asked, feeling my pulse quicken. She can petition, Henry replied. But she must prove it in court. We have more than enough evidence to show her motives are not benevolent. First step, independent psychological evaluation. I've scheduled Dr. Simone Lee for tomorrow. She specializes in forensic mental capacity assessments. Tessa listened silently, her face pale. Grandma, they tried to declare you incompetent? It's obvious I'm not, but the legal system sometimes operates on prejudice, not truth, I said. And ageism is a dangerous weapon. We spent the rest of the morning researching abusive guardianship cases, noting a horrifying pattern. Relatives using the law to strip seniors of autonomy, finances, even their homes. Marissa and Luke had been attempting the same in Portugal, but now their ambitions were playing out on our soil. By mid-afternoon, Tessa and I were driving to the state prosecutor's office. The weight of what we were about to set in motion settled over us. This wasn't just about our family. It was about ensuring justice, protecting others from the same cruel game. The next morning, I woke before sunrise, my mind buzzing with plans and contingencies. Tessa was still asleep, curled beneath her patchwork quilt, dreaming some small, innocent dream that the world outside hadn't yet tarnished. I tiptoed to the kitchen, brewed a pot of dark coffee, and poured a cup large enough to steel me for the day ahead. Today, Marissa and Luke's carefully orchestrated scheme would start to unravel. Henry Caldwell arrived promptly at 10 a.m., briefcase in hand, his expression a mixture of professional calm and barely restrained irritation. Ellie, he began as soon as I opened the door, they're not going to expect you back this soon. You have a serious advantage. Surprise. I smiled, the first real smile I'd allowed myself in months. That's exactly why I came back, I said, sipping my coffee. They thought I was gone. They thought I'd be a memory. But we're rewriting the ending. Henry nodded, spreading out a stack of documents on the dining table. There were financial statements, copies of passports, international bank transfers, and messages I'd painstakingly saved from the nursing home staff. Each piece was a puzzle fragment, and together they would expose the plan my daughter and son-in-law had tried to hide. Marissa and Luke are greedy, Henry said, not stupid. They may anticipate a legal fight, but they won't expect what you've already done. The question now is how far you want to go. I leaned back, considering. I don't want revenge that destroys them, I said slowly. I want justice. I want them to understand the consequences of abandoning someone they claim to love. That's the only lesson that matters. By midday, Tessa joined us, still rubbing sleep from her eyes, but eager to help. "Grandma," she asked, "what happens if they come back? Will they even recognize their own home?" I chuckled softly, a low sound that startled even me. "Funny you should ask," I said, "because that's exactly what I've arranged." Over the next 2 hours, we executed the first phase of our plan. I had already met with a contractor discreetly, someone who could handle renovations quickly and quietly. We started by converting Marissa and Luke's rooms into what looked like long-term rentals. Their clothes were boxed and placed in storage. Personal items removed under the guise of necessary renovations. Neighbors would later say the Carringtons had moved abroad for work. No one would suspect the truth. By the time late afternoon rolled around, the house was unrecognizable. Subtle changes had been made to furniture placement. Entrances were blocked with tasteful partitions, and their most valuable possessions were nowhere to be found. Every small detail had been designed to confuse, unsettle, and make them realize just how thoroughly I could take control when I chose. Henry watched with admiration, shaking his head. "Ellie, you've outmaneuvered them before the battle even begins. Most people would never have the nerve to come back like this." "It's not nerve," I replied. "It's survival. And the survival instinct doesn't care about politeness or expectations." As evening approached, I sat on the back porch, the November sky painting itself in shades of pink and gray, a salty breeze from the ocean brushing my face. Tessa joined me, her schoolbooks now closed, her mind alert but calm. "Grandma," she said softly, "do you think they'll ever understand why you did this?" "I don't think understanding is necessary," I replied. "They need to experience consequences. Sometimes people only learn through facing what they've tried to hide from. That's life's way of teaching responsibility." The first sound of tires crunching on the driveway broke the peaceful rhythm of dusk. I knew them immediately. Marissa's sharp voice, Luke's low, impatient muttering. They stepped out of their car, confident, ready to reclaim what they assumed was theirs. I stood, composed, walking toward the front door with Tessa at my side. The house felt different now. Our fortress, our domain, not theirs. When Marissa and Luke reached the door, they froze, their smiles faltering as the reality of the changes hit. What's happened?" Luke stammered, stepping back. Marissa's eyes darted around the altered interior, panic slowly replacing entitlement. This isn't possible," she whispered. I met their gaze, calm, unwavering. "It is possible," I said, "because I came back, because I chose to act, and because for once you underestimated me." Tessa squeezed my hand. "You thought she was gone forever," she said softly, her eyes locking with her mother's. "But Grandma isn't just back. She's in charge now." Their expressions twisted between disbelief and fear. I knew in that moment, but the lesson had already begun. They might have planned to leave me behind, but I had returned first, and I had rewritten the rules. As night fell over Windward Bay, the house hummed with a quiet power. It was no longer merely a home. It was proof that courage, persistence, and the refusal to be erased could outmatch greed, betrayal, and assumptions of control. And for the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. Complete, unshakable satisfaction. Tomorrow, we would deal with the legal fallout, the confrontations, the necessary explanations. But tonight, as the stars reflected in the calm ocean waters, Tessa and I simply stood there, victorious. We had survived betrayal, reclaimed what was ours, and ensured that the lesson Marissa and Luke needed to learn was now unavoidable. The house was ours, our sanctuary, our statement, our triumph. The crunch of tires on the gravel driveway signaled their arrival long before I saw them. Marissa and Luke had returned, dressed impeccably, their expressions a mix of confidence and entitlement, the same arrogance that had haunted my nights while I was trapped halfway across the world. They assumed the house, my life, and everything I had fought to protect would still be exactly as they remembered. I opened the front door with Tessa by my side, her small hand slipping into mine for comfort and courage. "Welcome home," I said, keeping my tone casual, almost playful. "We've been expecting you." Marissa froze mid-step, her eyes widening as they swept across the living room. Luke's brows furrowed, his jaw tightening, clearly trying to hide the shock creeping into his confident facade. "Ellie, what happened here?" Marissa stammered, her voice shaky. Luke, ever the aggressive one, stepped forward, fists clenched. "This is insane. You can't do this. This is our house. We have legal rights." I smiled, a cold, composed smile. "You have rights, yes, but rights don't erase consequences. You left me in a foreign nursing home with no explanation, no warning, no concern. You abandoned me. And now, you find a house that no longer belongs to you. That's called facing reality." Marissa's eyes darted around the room, taking in the subtle changes, furniture rearranged, entrances blocked with tasteful partitions, boxes neatly labeled storage in corners where her expensive decorations used to sit. The house looked lived in, yet alien. Every corner seemed slightly unfamiliar, designed to unsettle and confuse. Tessa stepped forward, her small voice steady. "It's not your home, Mom. You gave it up when you left Grandma. You thought she was gone forever, but she came back first." Luke's fists dropped slowly as he processed her words. He looked at me, disbelief etched into every line of his face. You planned this?" he demanded, voice sharp. "I planned nothing more than to survive," I said, my tone steady, unwavering. "And survival sometimes requires foresight, strategy, and the courage to take what's yours back." Marissa's knees wobbled, and she sank onto the nearest chair, unable to hide her panic. "Ellie, this is madness. You can't." "I can," I interrupted calmly, and I did. "You tried to erase me, to make me disappear, but the moment I had the chance to return, I didn't wait. I took action. I didn't do it out of revenge. I did it to teach a lesson about respect, trust, and the consequences of betrayal." Her hands shook as she scanned the room again, eyes finally landing on a stack of neatly organized documents on the dining table. "What's that?" she whispered, fear creeping into her voice. I gestured to Henry's handiwork, each file a testament to their schemes. Financial statements, international transfers, text messages, even witness statements from staff at the nursing home abroad. Every lie you told, every attempt to secure the inheritance before it was yours, it's all here. And now, it's time for you to face it. Luke's face turned red, his anger and frustration boiling over. You can't just... This is blackmail! We'll sue! You can try, I said evenly. But these documents prove everything. Your actions, your intent, your plan to abandon me for personal gain. And now, you are powerless. You've realized what it feels like to be at the mercy of someone who knows every move you'll make before you even think of it. Marissa buried her face in her hands. We can fix this. We'll make it right. We can... You can't fix betrayal, I said softly but firmly. You can only live with it, learn from it, and hope it never happens again. But for now, you experience the discomfort, the realization that you underestimated me and Tessa completely. For a long moment, silence enveloped the room. The autumn light from the large windows painted shadows across the walls, the kind that seemed to stretch and twist in mockery of their former certainty. I could see the understanding slowly dawning in their eyes. The world had changed. They were no longer in control. Tessa tugged at my sleeve. Grandma, what happens next? She asked quietly, her eyes wide but steady. I crouched to her level, smiling down at her. Next, we let the legal system take its course. But tonight, we reclaim what was taken from us. The house, our peace, and our dignity. You and I, Tessa, we've already won the first part. Luke's lips pressed into a thin line. Marissa's eyes filled with unshed tears. I didn't gloat. There was no need. The lesson was written clearly across their faces, stronger than any words I could speak. They had walked in expecting power and entitlement, and instead they were confronted with humility, loss, and the weight of their own choices. As the evening deepened, the soft hum of the ocean and the distant call of seagulls reminded me of why I had fought so hard. This was about reclaiming life, not destroying it. About showing that betrayal carries a price, and survival carries dignity. I turned to Tessa, brushing a stray hair from her face. Remember this moment, I whispered. It's a reminder that strength isn't about fighting with fists or yelling. It's about knowing when to act, when to wait, and when to reclaim what's yours without losing yourself in anger. Marissa finally spoke, voice small and broken. We didn't know. You did, I said, my voice gentle but firm. You just chose not to care. And now, you understand the consequences of that choice. Night fell. The stars reflected faintly in the ocean beyond our porch. Inside the house, a new rhythm of life had begun. Tessa's presence, the soft glow of lamps, the scent of fresh coffee and autumn air. It all reminded me that home was more than walls and furniture. Home was the courage to face what had been lost and the determination to build what should never have been taken. And as I watched Marissa and Luke sit in silence, processing the reality of their misjudgment, I knew this was only the beginning. Justice, in its truest form, wasn't about punishment. It was about awakening understanding. And finally, I had achieved that. The next morning, the house was quiet, almost eerily so. Marissa and Luke hadn't slept much. Their unease was palpable, a silent storm that seemed to thrum through the walls. I poured myself a cup of coffee, the warmth grounding me as I surveyed the results of the previous day's confrontation. Tessa sat at the kitchen table, notebook open, scribbling ideas for her school project, but occasionally glancing up, eyes alert to every sound. Henry Caldwell arrived shortly after breakfast, his expression a mix of amusement and professional satisfaction. "They called a lawyer already," he said, dropping into the chair across from me. "Apparently, they think threatening lawsuits will reverse the situation." I chuckled softly, shaking my head. "Let them try. All their evidence is here, documented, undeniable. They underestimated me completely, and now they're realizing the price of that mistake." Henry spread the files across the table again, showing me the latest legal notices. There were emails from attorneys, formal warnings, and even letters demanding immediate access to the property. Each one read like a frantic cry from people who had finally realized the rug had been pulled from under them. Tessa leaned forward, curiosity brimming. "Grandma, are they going to get in trouble?" I met her gaze, holding it steadily. They might face fines, restitution, maybe even criminal consequences if the courts find their actions deliberate. But the real lesson isn't about the law. It's about respect, about how we treat the people who care for us. That's what they're learning the hard way. By midday, Marissa and Luke had begun to explore the house cautiously, moving through the rooms that had once felt familiar, but now seemed alien. Every step was tentative, every glance filled with disbelief. They discovered their possessions carefully stored away, inaccessible under legal constraints I'd arranged in advance. Even their favorite furniture had been shifted, replaced, or repurposed. Henry watched quietly, his eyes reflecting the satisfaction of someone who'd seen meticulous planning pay off. "Ellie, you've turned the entire situation into a masterclass of strategy and foresight," he said softly. "Most people would crumble under betrayal. You turned it into a victory without violence or chaos." I smiled faintly. Victory doesn't need to be loud. Sometimes it's quiet, deliberate, and precise. That's when it hurts the most, when the lesson sinks in through awareness, not anger. As the afternoon light dimmed, Marissa and Luke were finally forced to sit down in the living room. Their previous arrogance had dissolved into uneasy silence. I poured 3 cups of tea, handing one to Tessa, one to myself, and finally to Marissa, who accepted it reluctantly, her eyes avoiding mine. "This isn't personal," I said, taking a careful sip. "It's about accountability. You made choices, and now you see the results. Sometimes the consequences are uncomfortable. Inconvenient, even humiliating, but they're necessary." Luke finally spoke, his voice subdued, almost introspective. "We didn't think it would get this far. We thought—" His words faltered, the arrogance stripped from him completely. "You thought wrong," I said gently but firmly. You underestimated the person you claimed to care for. You misjudged my strength, my persistence, and my unwillingness to be erased from my own life. That was your mistake." Tessa watched silently, a quiet guardian at my side, absorbing every word. She had seen betrayal, deception, and the cold edge of human selfishness. But she had also seen resilience, strategy, and the power of reclaiming one's life. I hoped this moment would shape her understanding of strength and justice far more than any lecture ever could. By evening, lawyers arrived, formal notices were served, and negotiations began. Marissa and Luke realized quickly that the legal system wouldn't bend to entitlement or greed. They were dealing with irrefutable evidence and someone who had fought several steps ahead. After the lawyers left, the house returned to its calm rhythm. Tessa and I sat on the back porch, the ocean breeze carrying the scent of salt and pine. "Grandma," she asked softly, "do you think they'll ever understand what they did?" I took a deep breath, the chill of the November air filling my lungs. "Understanding isn't guaranteed," I said. "Some people never learn, even when consequences are clear. But that's not our concern. Our concern is protecting ourselves, staying honest, and living a life we can be proud of." Night fell, and the stars appeared over the darkened ocean. The lights of the house glowed warmly behind us, a sanctuary that had survived betrayal and emerged stronger. Marissa and Luke's presence lingered like a shadow, but it was a shadow I now controlled. They could attempt to reclaim what they had lost, but the truth, the undeniable reality, was that they had walked into their own lesson. Tessa leaned against me, tired but secure. "I think we did the right thing," she murmured. "We did," I agreed, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "And tomorrow, we'll continue building the life they tried to steal. Every day forward is ours to reclaim, to enjoy, and to protect." As I watched her drift off to sleep later that night, I felt a quiet satisfaction. Justice, patience, and careful planning had given us more than material victory. They had restored dignity, security, and the sense that even in the face of deep betrayal, one could emerge not only intact, but stronger than before. The ocean whispered outside, eternal and constant, a reminder that time moves forward, and with it, life offers second chances and the possibility of reclaiming what's truly yours. And for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to believe that the worst was behind us, and the best was just beginning. The following morning, sunlight streamed through the windows, gilding the house in soft golden light. I woke early, as was my habit now, feeling a sense of calm I hadn't known in months. Tessa was already at the kitchen table, flipping through her school notes, pencil in hand, but her eyes sparkled with anticipation. Today wasn't just about dealing with the aftermath. It was about rebuilding, about reclaiming life that had almost been stolen from us. Henry arrived once more, carrying a folder of updated documents. "Ellie, the lawyers have filed preliminary motions. Marissa and Luke are trying to push for mediation, but with everything documented, they won't get far," he said, placing the folder gently on the table. I nodded, sipping my coffee. Mediation won't change reality. They can't rewrite what they've done or undo the choices they made. But they can see the consequences, and that's the point. Tessa looked up, curiosity written across her face. Grandma, what happens now? Do we just live like this forever? I reached over and patted her hand. No, sweetheart. This is just the beginning. We're taking back what's ours, not in a way that hurts us, but in a way that strengthens us. We create our own peace, our own rules. The house, the memories, the safety. All of that belongs to us now, and the future is open. By late morning, we began planning renovations. Not the kind meant to confuse or unsettle, but the kind meant to truly make the house ours. We worked side by side with contractors, measuring spaces, choosing colors, and imagining rooms not as they had been, but as they could be. Each corner we touched, each wall we painted, was an assertion. We had survived, and we were reclaiming our home and our dignity. Henry observed quietly, occasionally offering advice on legal precautions or organizational strategies. Ellie, what you're doing here is remarkable, he said. You're not just protecting yourself. You're teaching Tessa the power of resilience, of foresight, of claiming control over your own life. I smiled, feeling the truth in his words. That's the most important part, I said. It's not just about the house. It's about understanding that even when people betray you, even when the world seems to turn against you, you can create stability. You can protect what matters. That afternoon, I walked through the garden, now overgrown in places but full of potential. Tessa trailed behind, collecting fallen leaves and twigs, her imagination alight with plans for a small herb patch. Grandma, she said, holding up a particularly twisted branch. We could turn this into a little fairy garden. It could be our secret place. I laughed softly. I like that idea. A place just for us, where nothing from the outside can reach. As the days passed, Marissa and Luke became increasingly frantic. Their attempts to regain access were met with polite but firm refusals from our legal team. Every letter they sent, every call they made, was met with calm, measured responses. Calm they clearly didn't expect. They were realizing that the person they had abandoned wasn't just back. She was stronger, smarter, and prepared. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple, I sat on the porch with Tessa. The ocean stretched before us, endless and serene, reflecting the fading light. Grandma, she said quietly, do you ever feel scared that they might try something else? I took a deep breath, letting the cool breeze wash over me. Of course I do, I admitted. But fear doesn't control us anymore. We act with purpose. We act with truth. And that's stronger than anything they can throw at us. Tessa nodded, her small hand clutching mine. I think I understand now. It's not about getting back at them. It's about standing up for yourself and protecting what's yours. Exactly, I said, squeezing her hand. And that's a lesson worth more than any revenge. It's about integrity, courage, and resilience. Those are the things that last. As night fell, I went inside to check on the house. Every room bore the marks of our effort and care. A silent testimony to what we had endured and overcome. The walls no longer felt like they belonged to anyone but us. The spaces were ours, filled with potential and life. Later, after tucking Tessa into bed, I sat alone for a while, sipping tea and watching the moonlight ripple across the ocean. The world outside might still harbor people like Marissa and Luke, who would betray and manipulate. But inside these walls, there was safety, justice, and love. I felt a rare sense of completeness. Tomorrow would bring more decisions, more steps forward. But for tonight, there was only peace. The kind of peace that comes from surviving, from reclaiming, and from knowing that even in the face of betrayal, you can rise, stronger, wiser, and unbroken. And in that quiet, with the ocean whispering just beyond the porch, I allowed myself to believe fully. The worst was behind us, and the life ahead, ours to build, would be better than anything they had ever imagined. The next few days felt like walking through a carefully constructed storm. Marissa and Luke, desperate and increasingly erratic, began testing every boundary. Phone calls came in rapid succession, some polite, most demanding explanations, and a few outright threats. But the calm we maintained in response only seemed to unnerve them further. Tessa and I had settled into a rhythm, one that balanced vigilance with normal life, ensuring our sanctuary didn't become a prison of fear. One more moment. Henry advised patience, his tone steady. Ellie, they'll try everything. Don't underestimate the desperation of people who feel their world crumbling. Document everything. Respond carefully. And remember, they can't touch you where you're solid. I nodded, grateful for his guidance, but I knew the real strength lay in Tessa and me trusting ourselves. Our bond had been tested in ways most families never endure, and yet here we were, moving forward with deliberate steps. Every action a silent declaration that we were no longer at their mercy. One morning, while Tessa practiced piano, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find a man in a crisp suit holding a briefcase. "Miss Harper?" he asked, voice polite but firm. "I'm a representative of Marissa and Luke. They've requested a meeting to discuss an amicable resolution." I smiled faintly, letting my voice stay calm. "I'm listening." We agreed to meet at a neutral location, a small cafe where security cameras and witnesses ensured no surprises. As we sat across from them, I noticed the subtle shifts in their demeanor: unease, irritation, and a faint tremor of guilt, though neither would admit it. They tried to assert control, proposing compromises that sounded generous, but were in reality thinly veiled attempts to reclaim what they had abandoned. I remained steady, each word measured. "I'm open to discussion," I said, "but any resolution must recognize the actions that brought us here. This isn't about generosity. This is about responsibility, accountability, and understanding that choices have consequences." Marissa's voice rose, her frustration barely contained. "Ellie, you can't just—" I held up a hand, cutting her off. "I can, because I lived it. And you, both of you, must face what it's like when betrayal hits home. Every measure I've taken is fair, documented, and legal. There's no shortcut to understanding this lesson. And believe me, this is kinder than the alternative." Luke opened his mouth, but I didn't let him speak. Silence hung for a long moment, broken only by the hum of the cafe. Finally, they slumped back, wordless, realizing that for once they had met resistance they couldn't manipulate. Back at the house, I felt a wave of relief. Tessa looked at me with admiration and concern, her young face mirroring both pride and empathy. "Grandma," she whispered, "they can't trick you anymore, can they?" "No," I said softly, placing my hand over hers. "They've lost that power forever. And the lesson they're learning, it's worth every moment of patience and every careful step we've taken." That night, as we walked through the house, checking each room, I felt the deep satisfaction of reclaiming space, not just physically, but emotionally. Each corner held a memory. Each wall reflected our strength, and each step forward reminded me that survival had transformed into mastery. But even as peace settled, a quiet understanding lingered. Challenges would continue to arise. Life wasn't just about avoiding betrayal. It was about anticipating it, confronting it with clarity, and emerging not just unscathed, but stronger. And Tessa, seeing her grandmother not just endure, but thrive, was learning the most valuable lesson of all, that resilience and dignity are forged, not given. The following week felt like the calm before a storm, though the storm was already in motion. Every morning, I woke early, Tessa still asleep, and took a slow walk around the property, feeling the salty November air from the ocean and letting it steady my mind. A house, now fully under our control, looked ordinary to any casual observer, but to us, it was a fortress built with strategy, patience, and foresight. Every alteration, every subtle change we'd made served a purpose. To remind Marissa and Luke that they could not manipulate or intimidate us again. Henry Caldwell arrived mid-morning with his usual calm, carrying a stack of documents thicker than before. "They're ramping up," he said, setting them down. "Lawyers, local authorities, even a few neighbors questioning the changes. They don't understand that every move they make has already been anticipated." I poured coffee for both of us, letting the warm liquid anchor me. "Good," I said quietly. "Let them exhaust themselves trying to reclaim control. Every step they take proves their lack of foresight and understanding." Tessa emerged from her room, yawning but alert. "Grandma, are they going to come to the house today?" she asked, concern lining her small face. "Possibly," I said, placing a reassuring hand on hers. "But we're ready. They'll see that no amount of threats or pleading will undo what's already been done. This is not just about property. It's about showing them the consequences of abandoning family." By late morning, the first signs of Marissa and Luke's arrival became apparent. A black sedan pulled up, 2 attorneys in tow, and the familiar faces of my daughter and son-in-law followed shortly after. I watched from the kitchen window as they hesitated at the front door, noting the unfamiliar partitions, the rearranged furniture, the absence of their personal touches. The house that had once been theirs now looked lived in, functional, yet undeniably different, an alien environment for anyone expecting familiarity. I met them in the foyer, Tessa beside me, her small hand tucked securely in mine. Marissa's eyes widened at the sight of the living room, her lips parting in disbelief. Luke's jaw tightened as he scanned the reorganized space. Both of them had been so certain that I would be helpless, that my absence in the nursing home meant total erasure from their lives. But here we were, strong and prepared. "Ellie," Marissa began, her voice shaky, We didn't expect—" "You didn't expect that abandoning someone you claim to love has consequences?" I interrupted calmly, letting the weight of my words settle. Every document, every action you've taken, every plan to profit from my absence, everything is documented. And now you're seeing firsthand that actions have consequences. Luke stepped forward, trying to regain authority. This is ridiculous. You can't just... I held up a hand, my voice firm. I can, because unlike you, I know the value of foresight. I know the strength it takes to survive when those you trust betray you. And today, you're going to understand the depth of that lesson. Their attorneys attempted to intervene, papers rustling in protest. But I remained unshaken. This is not a negotiation, I said. It's a reckoning. You may think anger or threats will intimidate me, but the truth is, every step you've taken to manipulate or coerce has only strengthened my position. And the more you try to reclaim what you lost, the clearer it becomes that you cannot undo the choices you made. Marissa's eyes filled with tears, the first sign of genuine vulnerability since this ordeal began. Ellie, Tessa, we just wanted what we thought was ours, she whispered. I took a slow breath, letting compassion enter even as my resolve stayed intact. What was yours was never meant to come at the expense of abandoning family. You chose greed over love, expedience over loyalty. That's why this house feels unfamiliar to you. It's a reflection of the life you tried to control, the reality you refused to respect. Luke's hands clenched at his sides, his voice strained. You're punishing us for making mistakes. They weren't mistakes, I replied, my tone unwavering. They were choices, and choices have consequences. You thought I was gone. You thought your deception would go unchallenged, but I'm here, stronger than ever, and your reckoning is complete. You can leave now, or stay and accept what you've created for yourselves, a confrontation with the truth of your actions. For a long moment, silence reigned. Even the attorneys seemed uncertain how to proceed, caught between legal obligations and the undeniable moral force in the room. Tessa looked up at me, her wide eyes reflecting pride and awe. She understood, even at 10 years old, that we had shifted the balance of power through patience, intelligence, and courage. Finally, Marissa sank into a chair, her composure crumbling. Luke leaned against the wall, silent, the weight of reality pressing down on him. We didn't know it would be like this, Marissa admitted. I didn't need you to know, I said softly. I needed you to feel it, to recognize that abandoning the people who love you isn't just a choice, it's a failure, and failures have consequences. Henry, observing quietly from the side, gave me a slight nod, signaling that the plan had reached its apex. Every document, every preparation, every step of patience had led to this, a confrontation not of violence or vengeance, but of clarity, accountability, and undeniable truth. As the day faded into evening, they left the house in silence, the tension lingering like a heavy fog. Tessa and I watched from the porch as the black sedan disappeared down the street. The house behind us stood intact, a symbol of resilience and the lessons that can only be learned through direct experience. Later, when Tessa finally spoke, her voice was quiet but certain. Grandma, we did it. We really did it. I wrapped my arm around her shoulders, the salty breeze brushing our faces. Yes, baby, We did it. And more importantly, we showed them that strength, dignity, and love cannot be abandoned without consequence. This is more than a victory. It's a new beginning. As darkness settled over the ocean, I realized that the storm had passed. The confrontation was over, and though challenges would always appear, we had proven that resilience, foresight, and courage could turn betrayal into empowerment. And in that moment, the future felt open, full of possibilities, ready for the life we chose to build together. The days that followed were quieter, almost surreal. Marissa and Luke's absence left a strange kind of calm over the house. A calm I hadn't realized I'd missed. Tessa and I moved through the rooms with ease, reclaiming spaces that had once felt fragmented by betrayal. It wasn't just the physical reclaiming of our home. It was the reclaiming of our peace, our rhythm, and our right to exist without fear of deceit or manipulation. Henry Caldwell came by less frequently now, only to finalize paperwork and ensure the legal hold on the property remained airtight. "It's over, Ellie," he said one morning, a rare smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "They've been warned, documented, and legally bound. No surprises left for them." I nodded, watching Tessa play quietly in the living room. "It's over," I echoed softly, but it felt heavier than just a word. Over meant closure, yes, but it also meant responsibility. We had survived, yes, but survival demanded something more: the courage to rebuild, the patience to heal, and the willingness to embrace a life that had been paused for far too long. Tessa approached, holding a small notebook in her hands. "Grandma," she said, "I wrote something about all this for school, about family, trust, and standing up for what's right." Her eyes shone with pride, but also a maturity beyond her years. "Do you want to hear it?" I smiled, my heart swelling. "Of course, baby. Read it to me." Her voice trembled slightly at first, but she found her rhythm, and soon the words flowed with clarity. She wrote about betrayal, but also about resilience. She wrote about fear, but about courage too. And most importantly, she wrote about the power of choosing who belongs in your life, about the importance of protecting yourself and those you love. As I listened, I realized she had internalized the lessons I'd hoped to impart, not with lectures or anger, but through lived example. The weeks passed, and with them came a sense of normalcy that had once seemed impossible. We painted walls together, arranged furniture, and planted flowers along the back porch, turning the house into a reflection of our shared lives rather than a battleground of deceit. Each task, no matter how mundane, became an act of reclamation, a statement that we were here to stay, and that our home was no longer a place where betrayal could flourish unnoticed. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in hues of gold and deep violet, Tessa and I sat on the porch, sipping cocoa and listening to the distant roar of the ocean. "Grandma," she said softly, "do you think Mom will ever change?" I paused, letting the question settle in the cool evening air. "Change takes time, Tessa," I said carefully. "It's not about words, it's about actions, repeated over years. Whether she deserves a second chance depends on what she does next, not what she says now." Tessa nodded, her gaze fixed on the waves. "I think I understand," she whispered. "Even if she never changes, we have each other, and that's what matters." I pulled her close, wrapping my arms around her small frame. Exactly, baby. That's exactly what matters. The truth of it resonated deeply. In the end, no one could take away the bond we had nurtured, the trust we had rebuilt, or the life we had courageously chosen to create. That night, after Tessa was asleep, I wandered through the house alone. Each room held memories, some painful, some joyous. But now they were ours in a new way. The walls no longer whispered betrayal. They held only the echoes of resilience, courage, and the quiet power of a life reclaimed. I paused at the back window, gazing out at the ocean, its waves relentless and steady. It reminded me that time, like water, moves forward no matter what has happened, and that it's possible to find peace even after the most turbulent storms. I thought of Marissa and Luke, and for the first time, a strange sense of compassion surfaced. Not for their actions, which remained unforgivable, but for their choices and the consequences they had to face. Perhaps one day they would understand. Perhaps one day they would see that love cannot be used as leverage, and that abandoning family comes at a price. But that was their journey to navigate, not mine. Instead, I turned back inside, feeling a sense of completion that had eluded me for months. Tessa's laughter echoed from her room as she practiced piano, the notes drifting through the house and blending with the rhythm of my heartbeat. Our home was alive again, not just with sound, but with presence, purpose, and the certainty that we could withstand anything the world placed before us. In the days and months that followed, I focused on building a life that reflected choice rather than obligation. I reached out to old friends, volunteered for causes I believed in, and took long walks along the ocean, letting the wind carry away the remnants of fear and resentment. And through it all, Tessa grew in confidence, resilience, and understanding, her spirit shining brighter with each passing day. Eventually, the house became more than a home. It became a symbol of survival, of the courage to stand firm, and of the knowledge that we are never powerless, even when those we trust seek to undermine us. And as I watched the horizon one calm November evening, I realized that for the first time in years, I was no longer living in reaction to betrayal. I was living in alignment with my own choices, my own strength, and the unwavering truth that family, real family, is built, nurtured, and protected, not taken for granted. And so, the river of our lives, once turbulent and uncertain, had finally found a steady course. The storm had passed, and in its wake, we had discovered not just survival, but flourishing. A life reclaimed, a bond strengthened, and a future unbound by the shadows of the past.